to see how quickly kind of the switch flipped from, oh my God, we're doomed, it's going to take 2 years to recover from this, companies are going out of business, to an entire industry basically Scrooge McDucking and rolling around in its money. It's insane.
All right, everybody, welcome back, episode 103. How you living, world? We are back. We are at it. It's still not episode 111, the mystery episode.
Was it 111? We're gonna have to come up with something. People are
I'm changing it every week because I don't know.
Just kind of increment that number. It's not. Just wait till episode 114, guys.
Yeah, because you never know.
You never know.
Topics today, Tony: unintended consequences of golf's major boom. Not to be Debbie Downer, but bigger picture on things. And I got a couple quick hitting questions for you, Tony. This or that. So we're gonna pick your brain and jump right into it. That. Tony takes that. Good. Ooh.
We out.
You just picked an interesting situation for this week. But before we get to that, we know golf's been under a big boom, right? They call it the COVID. I mean, you can argue COVID pandemic had an interesting impact on the golf industry in that it, in droves, right, drew people to the game. Net result is you saw more people playing. It's one of the few activities a lot of people could do. Tee times came under high demand, course access, high demand, and for a large part, right, equipment companies have benefited, no question, right? For
sure. Yeah, it is pretty amazing. Even now, I mean, what are we 2+ years into this, to see how quickly kind of the switch flipped from, oh my God, we're doomed, it's going to take 2 years to recover from this, companies are going out of business, to an entire industry basically Scrooge McDucking and rolling around in its money. It's insane. So, yeah, it's been good.
I mean, that second, third week in March, when it kind of started, there were a number of smaller companies and even bigger companies we talked to where it's like, really, like, the sky is falling. We don't know what is next. We don't know what this is going to look like. And that wasn't just for golf. That was, I mean, I don't think I'm being overly dramatic and saying kind of life as we know it. What is this whole thing going to look like? And on the other side of that, it's like, oh my word, golf has boomed. And with that, monetarily speaking, right, these major companies have, and minor companies, right, almost uniformly, if you could not do well in the golf industry in the last 2 years, you couldn't play dead in a Western, right? Like, you just, I mean, and so we focused on that, and it gives us more things to talk about, right? No doubt. But it hasn't been all good. And there have been some, I mean, this is just being realistic, right? So, as we've kind of poked around a little bit, what are the things we should be also talking about, noticing, discussing, that are very, very real to a lot of people out there, I guess?
Yeah, I think you're starting to see a little bit of grumbling from the core golfers as course availability and tee times continue to be scarce. If I want to go play golf, a few years ago, I could pretty much go anytime. And now, as a member of a semi-private course, which is just really a sugar-coated way of saying public when you get right down to it.
Right, because if it's semi-private, it's also semi-public.
Yeah, semi-private is mostly public. Right. It's afternoon. It's crazy, like afternoon tee times, which, typically not the most desirable. If I've got something going on in the morning and want to scoot over, like that requires advance notice.
Sure.
It used to be. You have a lot of, you see it, they call them golf bros, right? You've seen that kind of thrown around. And I don't know, right? You don't want to be too judgmental, but you also kind of like, hey, maybe these guys are just a little too relaxed on the course. And I'm not talking like, I don't care if you want to play in a t-shirt like that should be fine. But there is a limit, right? Slow play is an absolute nightmare right now. And some of that comes from experience. Some of that too, I think maybe purely speculative here, but with new golfers, most of us are sort of almost taught the game, right? You don't just go, hey, I got nothing else to do, let's try this golf thing. It's usually somebody leads you into it, and that person kind of shows you the rope, teaches you the etiquette, things like that. I think there's probably less of that taking place. It's sort of like, well, hell, let's go to this big green area and whack a ball around. So, I mean, certainly some negatives there, but everybody seems to be doing pretty well with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting, right, kind of line in between, I don't think you're going to be the first person that's going to advocate for a really strict dress code or something like that, or, unbelievable. You want the game to be as welcoming as possible, right? But it's there, what's the line between being welcoming and then also being in a position where it's not degrading the experience of other people, right? In Colorado, we see it a lot with skiing, and there's a point where, and this is maybe the case for golf a little bit, but maybe not so much, is there's like a lot of safety issues when you're skiing and people are going fast, don't know what they're doing or whatever. There's safety issues, right? And trying to figure out how does golf welcome those people. But it kind of transfers into an article you and I both read. Shane Ryan had one talking about kind of the PGA members, professionals, staff at the courses, and really, what is kind of the plight of what's turning into a labor shortage in the industry. And I don't know, a couple things hit me from that article, but I'd love to hear what you took out of it. And what did that kind of get you thinking about or kind of churning on a little bit?
Yeah, I think reading through it, I mean, just a tremendous piece by Shane Ryan on Golf Digest. If you haven't seen it, go. Maybe we can figure out how to put up a link. We're not the YouTube guys, but just tremendous piece on sort of the plight of the club professional, and really kind of how rough and almost unforgiving that job can be. And a lot of what I read confirmed a lot of what I kind of expected or suspected was the reality, being a member and seeing, what goes on in my club year over year, where we're now on, I want to say, fourth, maybe probably fifth, maybe sixth professionals in the 12 years that I've been there. And in fairness, one of those guys was kind of so overwhelmed before he even get started that he was hired in the winter and quit before the course opened in the spring. But yeah, I mean, it's basically just a series of very short stories about golf pros being grossly overworked and, in many cases, highly underpaid. And it was kind of interesting. One of the numbers that stuck out was like the average salary for a golf professional, a head golf professional at the club, has increased to just over 100,000, which, that's good money. Unless you kind of start to factor it in, like, what is this on an hourly basis? That's one piece of it. And then the other piece is, well, that's an average. And I got to think that,
True.
When you're dealing with the elite clubs of the world, right? Augusta National not paying its pro $100,000, right? That's a much, right. Those are bigger numbers. And so I think you have sort of like the 1, 2, maybe 5% of like elite golf professional gigs really raising that number up. I suspect, if we were to look at the median number, it would be quite a bit lower still. So yeah, really telling, and it does make you kind of wonder, like, what does the future of that profession look like?
Mm-hmm. Well, and it got me thinking a little bit too, like, how does that impact the other pieces of the industry, right? Like, we focus a lot on equipment. And one of the things I took out of there a lot was basically pros saying how much more they want, the things that they wanted to do, like lessons, right? Being outside, playing maybe some as well, and having the job kind of shift to more administrative tasks, right? Doing inventory and, handling member requests, or being in the pro shop, kind of being a more or less a checkout teller, right? Or kind of a fast food type of operation where you're basically there to fulfill member requests, service them, do what needs to get done, and then move on to the next thing. And you're more or less seen as a disposable asset rather than something for the club to kind of build around. And then it got me thinking, like, well, no wonder. Like, how has green grass changed so much? And what does that mean, like, from an equipment standpoint moving forward? Like, are people going to go in and get fit by their local pro? It sure doesn't sound like it. Are people going to go in and local pro, they go and say, hey, what ball, oh man, I'm short. I need a dozen balls. Which one should I play? And the person behind the counter has either one, been there for 28 seconds, doesn't know anything, looks at their sell sheet and says, okay, yep, this one is on sale now or something. Here you go. Or two is so overworked, burnt out. They're like, dude, I don't care. Buy whatever you want. It
strikes me as kind of the club professional runs the risk of, especially, head pro, runs the risk of being one of those jobs that where the reality does not live up to the expectation. I get into it because you love golf and you want to be around the game. And I suspect that really, what we're talking about is a job that is equivalent of being the general practitioner of the golf world. And so, I mean, you get this laundry list of responsibilities and, like you mentioned, fitting. Well, we got demo days for that now. And I may love, and that's the thing, like maybe you got into this because fitting was part of what you loved. And that piece of the job gets trimmed off. I know a lot of guys who love doing club repair. That as a head pro, especially, that's probably going to be outside your responsibility. And then there's the balance between, all right, should I be in the shop, putting in the FaceTime, giving lessons, that sort of thing. And that's before we get into the piece that, what Shane didn't really touch on it was from the other side, or at least a different perspective of, quite frankly, how awful members can be. And it's, I've seen some of that firsthand. And depending on the size of the club, pick a number, right? But you have, call it 300 members who pay whatever the membership fee is. And, I think in many cases you have golfers, members who believe that, that membership fee entitles them to not only a 100% personalized experience. This club needs to be exactly what I want it to be.
Me.
Right.
Yeah.
Me and me alone. Whatever I want needs to be what happens. And then, the second piece of that, because you pay X amount, you feel like you have free reign to do and say whatever you want if you're not getting your way. And I think, that's a lot of what I saw is members making life unnecessarily miserable for the head pro. And I've seen that, again, for more than a decade, time and time and time again. And so you wonder, like, why? Why would I work 80 plus hours a week, often 6-7 days a week, not playing much golf, even though that's a good bit of probably why some people got into this, and it's just to be abused in some cases. It is in many ways a thankless job I've seen, and so I try and understand that and try not to bitch. That's sort of like, let's not nitpick stupid little stuff.
Right. Well, and I think it was maybe even at your course, Tony, where there was an individual who tried to return a shirt that had a stain on it. Like, clearly the shirt had been worn, maybe even tried to be laundered, and there was a stain, I think, from like red wine, if I'm not mistaken. Something that was pretty obvious, and the person just expected to be able to bring it back. Like, hey, you know what? This one isn't working out for me.
I have soiled myself. I have soiled myself, and I fully expect to be reimbursed for it.
Yeah. I mean, and so it's like, okay, there's got to be, I would love to hear from people. What are your craziest member complaints?
Yeah, let's look at it from the other side, right? Like what, never mind, pros have it rough. I accept that. And it is a thankless job. And quite frankly, I don't know why anyone would do it, but yeah, let's hear about stories of just members being miserable. And
right. And you don't realize how many of you, I mean, I the first thing I thought about when I was reading this article is, and this, Tony, but I was a classroom teacher for 20 years. And similarly, public education. Job. I was reading through the list. I'm like, check. Being asked to do more with less time. Check. Overworked, underpaid, underappreciated by society or whatever. Yeah. Check. And
let me tell you what you're doing wrong.
Let me tell you what my kid needs, and whatever.
That's it, right? Individualized. It's an unrealistic expectation of a fully individualized experience.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that education is in a better place now than
That
it
you're gone.
was. Yeah, that I'm gone. First of all, yeah, no, definitely, definitely better that way. But you know, the article did an interesting thing too. It made me think about this dynamic of people that either. It's the way it was put to me by a teacher very early on when I was starting. It said, do you work to live or do you live to work? And again, this work-life balance idea, I think, is hugely important. And you kind of saw that start to play out a little bit too. And I think you see that in the golf professionals in that industry as well, is people, I don't care what your job is, people want to have, or a lot of people do, a life outside of that job where they get other needs fulfilled or they have passions and interests. And again, this idea of balance. But I also get that there's a generation where that wasn't the case. You lived to work and you did that. And that was so much more of your identity than maybe it is today. And so maybe it's a generational shift, but yet you look, then you have this demographic of a younger labor force that maybe doesn't have that identity. And if we're going to be overly stereotypical in golf, you have probably a slightly older population playing the game that maybe has a different expectation around that. And so, it's not like the majority of members at private courses are people that have grown up into adulthood in the last 10 to 15 years.
That is a fact. I mean, it'd be interesting to see kind of as numbers roll out, as we kind of get past the COVID boom, to see kind of how the average age has shifted. But, I've certainly gotten older on a relative basis over the last couple of years. It used to be a kind of a running joke at, my club for the longest time. I was one of the young guys. I was one of the young guys when I was 45.
Now you're just an old cranky bastard, right?
Right. And I'm sort of like, I'm solidly middle-aged by club standards, but, if without the COVID boom, I'd still be one of the young guys. So, I mean, there is, in that respect, it has been good. And, so maybe some of that, right? This infusion of young blood into the sport, translates to the pro shops as well, where you do get a little bit of that. Shane mentioned in his article, right? This idea of younger guys, a different generation that has different expectations about, what work needs to be. And, we can talk about, the boomer mentality of these kids today and their work ethic. But at some point you also have to go, these kids today aren't insane. They've figured out that there's more to life than going to work every day.
I was going to say, the question is, with that to me, is it's not a right or a wrong, right? Where it's generation, it would be really hard. I mean, you could, on one hand, you could say, yes, everybody, have work ethic, be diligent, be thorough, do a good job. And someone else says, yeah, absolutely. But
I think it is wrong, though. I think it is wrong to expect somebody to work 80 hours a week, be accountable for absolutely everything and anything, and just, get what is, by a reasonable standard, mediocre pay at best in many cases. So I think that it is an unreasonable expectation, and kudos to all the guys who are coming up, admittedly in smaller numbers, saying, what the hell with this? No, we're not going to do it that way.
So maybe that's the question. Is a new paradigm, a new generational paradigm, both necessary for the longevity of the golf industry, needed for the benefit of the individuals who are doing the work, and ultimately a fundamentally more healthy approach in general? Maybe the old guard is wrong. Maybe 80 hours a week and being ultimately in a service industry where it's just, yes, sir, yep, no matter what, I will take care of that, etc. Maybe the cost for that approach is too high, and we're starting to finally see that.
I think so. And I was wondering about this a little bit. And I was like, hey, is really what's changed here in terms of, the PGA of America talking about diminishing enrollment in the golf management programs. And you wonder, is this is what's changed really just the availability of information and the greater ability for these young guys to understand what it is they're actually getting into, kind of taking sort of the glamour off of it and painting a realistic position of like, look, you're going to have to grind. And I get that too. There probably are a segment of the population coming up that just doesn't want to grind in what has traditionally been like a ladder climbing industry, right? You assistant pro and then
put in your time and
get a job as a head pro, and then ideally a head pro at a nicer club and a nicer club at a nicer club, and
maybe a GM.
Right,
yep.
Yeah, you're the guy at Pine Valley, right? That's kind of the ideal, and then you realize like that's there's only so many of those jobs, and most people just aren't going to get them, and so like it's sort of in a segmented kind of world that is kind of the golf course management piece of it. It's sort of like, do you really want to grind 80 plus hours a week and claw your way up to what works out to almost like middle management, right? You're not certainly not elite status, anything like that. So I get it.
Right. Great question would be to ask people in that situation now, okay, if you knew then what this looked like now for you over that time, would you still have made that same decision? Would you, if you knew that this is what that path would look like, would you still go down that road with your eyes, instead of being partially shut, probably more just wide open to the realities of what that profession might look like? You could probably ask that question for a number of industries and a number of jobs, and it's not totally fair because you can't have perfect knowledge going into something, but it would be interesting. I said, do we just maybe know more now?
Well, I think there's greater awareness, and again, the game has changed with, we talk about launch monitors and places like, Fitting Chains, Club Champion, GXG, TrueSpec, etc. You have, basically what I'm getting at is you have options now. If you want to be in golf and have a golf job, you don't have to go through that PGA program anymore. Like you can teach and not be a PGA professional, and there are guys out there who are doing it very successfully at an
Butch
elite
Harmon
level.
Is above average. Don't believe he's a PGA.
Joe Mayo, right?
Joe Mayo, TrackMan.
Exactly. So you can do that. Fitters, right? If you want to focus on fitting, you don't need to be a PGA professional to be an outstanding fitter. And I get there's some guys, right? And there are elements of the job that appeal to different people. So you have guys that want to do that. You probably have men and women who get excited about the merchandising piece, or basically being that more of a general manager role. And so there's lots of different things you can do, and in golf, and a good bit of them in today's world don't really require that PGA program. And that's that's something. If the PGA of America wants to look at something and go, hey, what's changed? Well, that's a good bit of it. And so maybe kind of dial that back a little bit or adapt it to the modern world. I know two guys locally who were in the program, out of the program, back and forth, because the cost of the program itself didn't justify what was going to come out of the other end. So there are lots of things to look at. And again, I'll just keep going back to this too. It's just sometimes members can be assholes, and that part of it is super unappealing. Yeah.
Yeah. More places we can go with that, but you've mentioned PGA. There's a tournament this week. And by the time this airs, people will be listening to it. We're already being in day 2, theoretically, so we'll see how ridiculous we end up looking.
Unless rain.
Who do you like this week, Tony? Prognosticate. It's going to be Friday. People are going to call you
like
an idiot or a genius.
If you want to know who's actually going to win, go find Rick Rungood and maybe get a legitimate pick. But, I mean, there are stories, right? Tiger is in the field, I believe. And I got to think that this Southern Hills here is going to be a much easier walk than Augusta. So it
can't be a whole lot harder.
That's a compelling storyline. Jordan Spieth in a position for the career Grand Slam, as he's been, for the last several years, if we're being honest. But this time around, it feels like he could actually win it. So that's kind of awesome. Ricky Fowler's in the field, and I would love to see him kind of just come out of what seems like nowhere, big comeback and win it. That would be awesome. Unlikely, but I would
awesome. Love to see Ricky do that. I don't think it's going to happen unless he switches his golf ball, but story for a different day.
And then you have, like be legitimate, just the PGA professional guys, and how. I mean, again, you want to talk about worse odds than Ricky, but like, what if one of these club professionals just came out of nowhere and just somehow managed to have like just a magic week? That's always like, that would be the best case, right? Everybody.
We could use
Tiger's always the best
story.
case, but failing Tiger, give me some rando guy that you'd never heard of. I was looking at the field online.
Yeah.
They do a nice job. They got pictures of everybody. It's always funny. You like, because I don't watch a ton of PGA. I could, I recognize names, and so I kind of assume that if I don't recognize the name, it's probably a PGA professional. But What's great is like, you look at the pictures and like, the guys with the contracts will have their Titleists and their pink hats, and then there's just like a guy with a random hat or no hat at all, and I'm like, all right,
yep,
I'm pulling for you, man.
Yep,
that guy. That guy is my guy.
I saw they showed earlier this week to the concession prices. The prices, like, we make such a big deal of it at the Masters because everything is ridiculously inexpensive. I expect when you go to a tournament, Disneyland, a professional sports game, things are always more expensive, right? The concessions are always
a good deal.
It's not where you go for a good deal. But this is
the patio furniture of everything.
This is ridiculous. I mean, it was like,
you see like a $19 Stella or some such.
Yeah. Michelob Ultra, $18 or something for one.
Sold.
For one.
Is it a big cup? Like, what are we getting here?
I don't know. I mean, so it got me thinking about this, Tony. What do you think would have more value on the secondary market inside the ropes there? Perhaps a beer from the concession stand or a Titleist Pro V1 left dot? Which is more valuable in the market in that particular part of the market?
Remarkably, as an individual item, the beer trumps the left dot based on my latest understanding of eBay pricing. Like, you can the left dot, yeah, you would need to trade a couple, maybe even a full sleeve to break even there. That's
just where we're at.
That's criminal. Right? What the hell? Yeah, like fan friendly. Way to go.
Yeah, it's shame on you. Get some better. I mean, come on, Michelob Ultra, right? They dropped Phil as a sponsor, right? I believe that is correct. So they saved some cash there.
Well, if they sponsored Phil, they dropped him. That's pretty much how.
Well, yeah, right. Come on, man. Come on, people.
So when I worked at an indoor golf place for a couple winters, and in terms of return on investment, profit margin, the best bang for the buck was on a keg of Bud Light. Like that's where we made the money. And we were selling those for like
gouging people,
like $4 a pop. Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is screw you on that is That's I guess
Let's just say that. All right, quick hitters. Got two more questions for you, Tony.
Yeah.
mygolfspy era equipment. So we'll call it the last decade to 12 years, 10 to 12 years. So 2010. Okay. We're going to hit on a couple of these in episodes. Today, we are going to start with drivers.
Okay.
The best driver by whatever metrics you want to use. I don't care. And the worst. What is the best driver in the last 10 to 12 years, mygolfspy era? And what is the worst driver in the last 10 to 12 years?
So I'm going to give you two really good ones.
Okay.
So, because they kind of span like more recent history and then ancient history. So more recently, Ping G400 LST. That is one that to me is just like kind of a paradigm shift. Like that thing was just like for its time where it was so good to the point where Ping was like, yeah, we kind of exceeded our expectations. Remember, they delayed the 410 and everybody's like,
to like June. It was supposed to be January and then it wasn't until like June.
And people are like, oh, they're just trying to stretch out the market. And the engineers are in my ear going, we just took
kind
us
of
longer
outkicked our
to-
coverage.
yeah,
We did a
it
little
was-
bit too
yeah,
good.
It was really difficult to beat. And the other one that sticks out kind of early mygolfspy era, the Adams 9064 LS. So kind of a
What do you
classic.
remember about that one? What?
Yeah,
why did
just
that
like
one
it
go
was
in the
just
pants?
so good. It was long and it just felt good. It looked good. And, for my money, the last great Adams driver. So yeah, I mean, just kind of that memorable.
Last of an era.
Worst.
How about the worst? There have been some absolute duds.
Yeah. I think in terms of just if we're using performance as the metric, kind of overall, man, I would say the Tour Edge hot launch from last year was pretty bad. Bomb Tech Grenade kind of stands out as being particularly bad.
Yep.
And then you have kind of bad for different reasons. So Ugly Bad, Power Pod 2. And then you kind of get into the really pitchy stuff. Like there was a Cobra that was super, super uncomfortably loud at one point. I can't even remember all the kind of the pre-amp cell stuff when they were just kind of starting to mess around with composite and, Sasquatch type loud. So there was like the ones that sound bad. And then there was like just the ones that should have never been made for performance reasons.
Yeah, I think about anything with a square or triangle shape to it. Or I think that era, like you look back on like eras in fashion.
Titleist is like never happened.
Never. What do you mean triangle shaped driver? Never heard of it. Never seen it.
Check our website. We didn't do that.
Yeah, like never. You look back at eras
it's not in the archives
in fashion, and even people that wore it at that time look back and go, "God, what was I thinking? Like that was just awful."
Don't hate on the FTIZ. Come on.
I just anything square or triangle. Just,
the Fatiz was good. Fatiz.
I just can't do it.
IQ Bad is good.
Ugh,
IQ Bad, IZ good.
I don't know. But there have been some,
IZ,
like I said,
Zed.
Legendary ping.
Is that how Doc would say it? He'd call it the IZ. Doc
so.
Hawk. All right. Yeah.
Doc Hawk would call it that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I like
all right.
IZ. Suck it.
Tell us your stories, people. If you're a golfer out there, be nice, right? Be happy.
Just don't
polite. Don't be a dick.
Treat people.
Be nice to the people at the courses that are there working hard. If you have a great story to share, I'll pick the best story and absolutely give you a Japanese head cover. 100% true.
We only got like
because
40
we've got
left.
78 more to go. And between now and then, find us and follow us, GolfSpy T, GolfSpy C. And until then, we will see you next time. We out.